All right, for today's video review, we're going to be taking a look at Transformers Beast Wars Basic Class Terragator. Terragator here is one of the third year of the toy line figures from 1998, and is when they started doing Fuzors, which, if you're unfamiliar, I mean, I think you can probably already get the concept here. Basically, the Fuzors transformed into a combination of two different animals. So in Terragator's case here, he turns into a combination of an alligator and some sort of spiny-shelled turtle. And yeah, it's a relatively good alt mode. I love the detailing and the texturing and the paintwork there on the shell itself. I think that looks great. He's got, nice alligator features too. He does sort of like when you tip him under, you can kind of see some of the some of the junk here with like, how his robot mode legs start back here and then they end up all the way here to make his front feet for the alligator mode. But from most angles you're looking at it, it's not too bad. It's just, you can still kind of see it a little bit under here, but it's not the end of the world. He does have a gimmick in this mode where if you take the tail and you push it into the body, it pushes forward and makes his mouth open and close, which I think is pretty cool. It doesn't always work great, but it's a pretty simple mechanism there. In terms of articulation, I mean, you're not getting, oh, there we go. There's the entire rest of the robot mode. Well, yeah, the shield / shell does not stay on super well all the time. At least in this mode, it's like, has gravity working in its favor, but we'll talk about that later. But yeah, in terms of articulation, the back legs here are on ball joints. Obviously, you can do that mouth opening thing with the gimmick there. The front legs, I mean, you can kind of move them around a little bit, but the more you move them, the more you see that they're actually connected back here and not up here. So you don't really get a whole lot of meaningful movement out of those. But yeah, in terms of comparisons, for the standard one, here he is with Kingdom Sideswipe. Cool. For a modern Beast Wars core class figure, here he is with Kingdom Rat Trap. And then just for fun, here he is with Beast Wars Snapper, just because they're both turtley. And like he kind of has the same thing going on as Snapper, where like, once you look underneath the shell, the legs are all like janked up and coming from the wrong place. But I'd say it's fair to say that Snapper is much worse in that department, since he manages to stay a bit more to the ground. For transformation, you technically can do the whole thing in leaving the extra parts on there, because he is a bit of a parts farmer. But just to show how everything works, I think I'll take them off. So you take the shell and you remove it. And what's kind of neat is his what will become his robot mode hands here are these little claws that actually make up parts of the outer spining of the, or like the spiking of the shell, which is a cool concept. They don't line up like perfectly, like you can tell that there's a bit of a separation there and back here, but I think it's a neat overall idea. And then the tail here, which is plugged into one of the hands, actually unplugs, and that'll be his weapon in robot mode. So in terms of the actual figure, this is what you're looking at. Just kind of a obvious wrapped up robot here. But yeah, for the rest of the transformation, first thing you want to do is take the legs and rotate them all the way down like this. Rotate the shins so that they're facing forward, and the feet so they're facing forward. They're just on ball joints here. Then take this whole section, it hinges down, rotates like that, and then actually slides to be more in line with the rest of the body. Take this hand here, and this is the mechanism here. This is how this was set up, is since this was plugged into the tail, and you push this forward, that's what actually opens and closes the mouth, which is why sometimes it doesn't work super well, because sometimes you'll just like unpeg or like, activate the elbow ball joint here. So it can be a little bit haphazard, but it mostly works. But yeah, you want to take that arm and just tilt it up like that. And then this hand is actually pegged in right back here, and you want to bring that up. And then on this blue panel, you want to bring that down and then rotate the arm so it's facing downward. Rotate this whole arm so the alligator head is now upside down. And then take his robot mode head, just rotate it 90 degrees and then hinge it up. And there you have Terragator in his base robot mode. And yeah, as a base robot mode, I think this looks really good. This is only like 2/3 of the alt mode though, because you need this stuff. And where this stuff goes in this mode is, I don't think super fantastic myself. The shell here just becomes a shield, and then also on the inside here you have his Predacon spark crystal, so you can see that there. You pretty much just peg it on where it was in alt mode, just back onto his arm using these two little ports right here, which are in between a hinge. So that's another reason that it doesn't stay on super well. So it kind of just becomes this big shield on his arm, and then also kind of completely hides his arm, but you know, whatever. And then this one, you also just plug in back where it was in alt mode. But first what you want to do is take the alligator legs and just, you know, rotate them back like that so they're a bit more out of the way. And then on the underside here, he's got a little double-barreled blaster that you hinge out. And then you use the same peg that you did for alligator mode and peg it into his hand the same way that it was in alligator mode as well. And yeah, so it kind of just ends up with this little guy holding these two huge unwieldy weapons. Like, he can't even keep his arm straight down to the side because him holding this weapon is literally taller than the whole figure, so he has to have it out like that, which is like, fine, whatever, that's okay. You can have big unwieldy weapons in Transformers. I'm okay with that. I do wish that there was an option to store these things in any way that wasn't like this, because it sort of feels like it would not have been that difficult to have these two pieces have some way that they could like peg together and then store cleanly on the back. Like, he'd still have like a huge turtle shell on his back, but that's a little bit less obtrusive than having, you know, the huge shell hiding his one arm and then this one kind of null and voiding the other arm. So I'm not crazy about that. Beast Wars tended to do this where they would not, you know, obviously there was great storage in alt mode for a lot of their parts since they were literally parts of the animals, but in robot mode, they don't usually have very good storage, and you can kind of fudge it with some of them. Like, there's a little way that you can kind of like loop Cheetor's like tail gun onto his back, but this guy really has nothing without, like, you know, modifying the figure in some way, which it's kind of rough. I mean, I don't think it's like a horrible look with him and his weapons there, but I definitely would prefer if there was at least an option to store them, especially since the weapons are like so crucial to the alt mode and are like basically 2/3 of it, and then also kind of unwieldy in robot mode. So yeah, I'm not like the biggest fan of that whole choice in general, but what can you do? In terms of articulation, I guess we'll take this stuff off and talk about how it changes it, I guess. His head here is just on a swivel, so you can swivel it back and forth. It's also on a bit of a hinge for transformation, so you can kind of get him looking down, but it starts to look pretty disjointed pretty quickly. This one arm with the alligator head, it's on a swivel here at the shoulder and can rotate out like that. It can only rotate out to the side about that much just because of the alligator head. He does have a bit of the gorilla elbows thing going on where the elbow ball joint only hinges in. That does also give him a bicep swivel here, but I don't know, like, really how great that looks in in other positions, like if you had this facing forward. So, you know. And then on this arm, there's a ball joint at the shoulder and then also that separate hinge, but I don't think you'd really need it, and it doesn't look as good. Again, ball joint at the elbow, and then he has the separate hinge at the hand here. He's got a waist swivel, kind of like just above the waist, kind of in the midriff there. He's got ball joints at the hips, go forward and back and out to the side, ball joints at the knees that get a little over 90s worth of bend, and then obviously also afford him a thigh swivel, and then ball joint at the feet, which give him a bit of ankle tilt, and then obviously rotation. So yeah, you know, pretty typical of Beast Wars, lots of ball joints. Obviously, if you have the shield plugged in, then that, you know, you can't use the wrist hinge there, but also like you can't even see his whole arm. So I don't know, you even really can't meaningfully use the elbow. I mean, you can do it like that, where he's kind of hiding behind his shell there. That looks kind of cool. And then, you know, this kind of just makes it so that, you know, his arm has to be bent up in some way so that this isn't running into the ground, but otherwise everything works the same in terms of size comparisons in this mode. Here he is again with Kingdom Sideswipe. Got to adjust the camera there a little bit. There we go. For that standard size comparison, here he is again with Kingdom Rat Trap. So you can see, you know, pretty average size basic class figure, a little bit bigger than our modern core classes, but same idea. And then here he is with Beast Wars Snapper, just for another turtley sort of figure there. And yeah, you know, overall I still think he's a good figure. He's one of those, you know, Beast Wars figures that like has some aspects of it that I don't think have aged particularly well in terms of like having these huge unwieldy weapons. And I think with him, it's one of those ones that it's so frustrating because it's like, oh, that doesn't even feel like a, you know, oh, that's obviously like a design thing that was just impossible to overcome. Like, no, it's just a couple pegs and slots, and that easily could have stored in the back. He even has a couple like slots back here that I think are just molded detail, like one back here too, probably just to save a little bit of plastic, because he certainly does not have anything on either of these weapons that could actually peg into those slots. There's also a kind of inexplicable little tab here on the gun section. So at first I thought like, oh, there is something. You actually just tab this in back there, but no, it's not the same size. The tab is way too small. So some weird stuff there that, I don't know, maybe that's just like to get it out, but also like you can easily grab the gun barrels, so I'm not sure. I also don't know what this little bar in the middle is. It might just be like a structural thing, I guess, for the shell. I don't know. There's some weird stuff on here. Maybe I'm just completely missing something, but I don't see a slot that would fit this or any other peg holes that would fit the pegs aside from the ones on his arms. I don't see any slot that would fit that tab or any tabs that would fit either of these three slots. So it just feels like, you know, it got so close to having been able to have actually stored these weapons, in which I would say this is a great figure, but didn't quite get that far, unfortunately. But either way, I think he's still a fun little figure nonetheless. But yeah, if you enjoy my videos, make sure to leave a like and consider subscribing. I do reviews every Tuesday, Thursday, and Sunday. And without further ado, here we have the review for Transformers 1998 Beast Wars Fuzor Terragator.